for years.
I think this would be an anomaly anywhere it would have taken place, whether it's Southern Ohio or anywhere else.
I think this would be an anomaly anywhere it would have taken place, whether it's Southern Ohio or anywhere else. That's a direct quote from a former prosecutor, an expert brought in to explain the unexplainable. But anomaly is a bureaucratic word, a statistical cushion. When a judge looks at a booking video and uses a word like anomaly, what he's really saying is that the evidence on the defies a rational starting point. He's saying the system walked into a house and found a reality that the law doesn't have a clean, pre-printed form for. We now have the jail video. It's not a legal argument. It's a silent, black and white record of 4 people walking from a sheriff's van into the Scioto County Jail, and the distance they walk is measured in feet, but the distance between what they told the world and what the state found inside 290 Omar Street is measured in the faces of 16 children. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to EvidenceAxis, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Think of this jail reportage as a single, slow-motion X-ray. You are watching a family's public skeleton being scanned in real time under fluorescent lights. The first figure extracted the vein is 73-year-old Gary Cider Senior.
But now we're getting our first look at the parents and grandparents of those children being taken to jail. Video from the jail's Sallyport shows a sheriff's van pulling into the jail. The Ciders aren't the only ones in the van, so it takes some time for the corrections officers to get them out of the vehicle. The first Ciders family members that jail staff removed from the van is the oldest, 73-year-old Gary Cider Senior. It appears the officers are having some trouble getting him out of that van. They're at the back of the vehicle for a while as they try to help him out. And then an officer brings a wheelchair out from the jail so Gary Senior can sit in it so the jail staff can safely move him into the jail for the booking process to begin. Now, we know that there are concerns about Gary Senior's health and his ability to walk. He's currently being treated for a serious medical condition at the hospital, but back on June 30th, that serious medical condition wasn't known to.
The corrections officers don't pull him out, they negotiate his weight. His body seems to fold into itself, and a wheelchair is produced not as a courtesy but as a mechanical necessity. He's cuffed in the front, shackled at the ankles, and tethered to a belly chain. His pajama bottoms hang loose. He looks in this moment less like a patriarch and more like a piece of evidence himself. Then comes Gary Jr., the son. The visual contrast is immediate and uncomfortable. Gary Jr. is physically substantial, well-fed, moving under his own power, shackled at the ankles but standing squarely the wall as officers uncuff him. He opens his mouth for a standard contraband check without protest. A jail officer searches his arms, documenting tasks across with a sword, an outlaw symbol with a peace sign.
Questions that he's asked, just as his family members did. Gary's intake form says that he either uses drugs or alcohol or is under the influence of one or the other. Jail staff documented several tattoos on Gary Jr. They have names and hearts and crosses. One is a cross with a sword. One is an outlaw tattoo with a peace sign. In the intake video, you can see Gary Jr.
These are symbols of allegiance and identity, cataloged on an intake form. But as Gary Sr. sits slumped in the wheelchair, eventually put his head into his hands in a posture of complete collapse, the camera captures a quiet moment that needs no audio. The son is standing
to lean up against the wall, and then they uncuff him so the booking process can begin. One thing that I notice here, Gary Jr. appears to be pretty well fed, and his father appears thin. We don't know how well the children in the home were eating, but Gary Jr. doesn't appear to have missed many meals. As an officer uncuffs Gary Jr., he's told to stand against the wall, and then the officer moves to unlocking his ankle cuffs. The officers will then remove Gary Sr.'s handcuffs. As this entire process is unfolding in the hallway, Christina Ciders and Elizabeth Ciders remain in the Sallyport in that sheriff's van. Eventually, one of the officers looks inside Gary Jr.'s mouth to make sure that he doesn't have anything in there. And then Gary Jr. is taken to another area of the jail for further processing. Gary Sr.
This is where the bureaucratic narrative detonates. The jail log is clinical. The charges are 16 counts of child endangering. The bond is $300,000 each. But the jail video reveals a hierarchy of physical frailty that contradicts the control they allegedly exerted over that house. Look at the 2 women brought in next. Christina Ciders, the grandmother who goes by Lynn, walks in with her handcuffs secured to a belly chain, spine straight, answering the intake questions with a transactional indifference. She's done hard things before, her posture suggests. But Elizabeth Ciders, Gary Jr.'s wife, enters the frame and everything shifts. She is not handcuffed. She's carrying papers, her body is folded inward, her hair is wet from a shower, and on her left arm, there is a visible mark. A bruise that the intake video captures in flat, unforgiving light. Elizabeth has no prior criminal record. This is her first time in a jail jumpsuit. She doesn't look like a perpetrator in this frame, she looks like a survivor of a closed system who has just been handed over to a much larger one.
It's wet, so it appears she had a shower. Her hair looks different from her mugshot. Elizabeth looks around at times. She doesn't have a criminal record, so this is the first time she's been to jail. Elizabeth also has a mark on her left arm, and it looks like a bruise. We don't know what caused that mark. It's also visible in video from her arraignment. Gary Senior is wheeled into the same area. It's the same process. There's no audio.
The officers pat her down, and she complies with the wide-eyed silence of someone who learned long ago that compliance is survival. There they are, the four adults. One is too weak to stand, one is too hardened to flinch, one is too comfortable, and one is carrying papers and bruises.
Doesn't have anything on him like a weapon. Now it's time for the officers to bring Christina Ciders and Elizabeth Ciders into the jail. Christina is let in first. She is handcuffed just as her son and husband were, but she isn't shackled at the ankles. And you may notice something interesting here when you see Elizabeth Ciders. You'll notice she's carrying some papers, but Elizabeth Ciders isn't handcuffed. Christina enters the jail hallway first. Elizabeth follows behind, and both have papers in their hands. Christina's handcuffs are connected to a belly chain, just like Gary Jr., but she is not shackled at the ankles. Christina stands up straight, but Elizabeth's body language appears to be much different. She's practically cowering. She looks scared. The corrections officer asks Christina a number of questions, which she appears to answer. Elizabeth simply stands by and watches as this entire process unfolds. Then it's
This is the mechanism of control. This is the rhythm of a closed system. The state now has to reconstruct what happened behind that door, and they're doing it through one of the slowest, most invasive forensic processes available: the extraction and analysis of digital devices. The Ohio Attorney General's Bureau of Criminal Investigation has seized an undisclosed number of phones, tablets, and computers from the Omar Street property. This is not a search for a smoking gun. This is a search for an internal, digital weather system that kept 16 human beings trapped inside a single gravitational pull. The children were on social media. That's a fact and evidence. But here's the anomaly within the anomaly. Their accounts didn't show their faces. The content scrubbed from these profiles by investigators reveals no family photos, no selfies, no school group chats. Instead, they found a wall of Japanese anime, reposted TikTok loops, and fragmented videos that seem, in hindsight, like coded signals, cries for help wrapped in the language of avatars.
We do know that the children, though, appeared to be on social media. They had social media accounts. They had phones. That's our understanding. So they're going to be downloading a number of devices they seized from that house. How telling could that be in assisting with this investigation? And also, that can take a lot of time.
I think that'd be very telling as far as the investigation. And we did that on the Roden Manley Gilley homicides. Our sheriff's office and our other agencies in Pike County do that on a regular basis. You can glean a lot of information from, say, iPhones, iPads, Androids, those things like that. Locations, what the children were doing, what apps they were signed into, and basically just kind of seeing what they were doing over the last few years. And it is interesting with the situation that's alleged that these children would happen to have social media accounts. That is very interesting.
So, here's the question that turns this from a local crime item into a national security of childhood. If a child has a smartphone in their hand for years but never points the camera at themselves, who told them to stay invisible? That's the ticking clock. The BCI Cyber Crimes Unit is now running every kilobyte through extraction software, mapping locations, app logins, and to deleted messages. That process doesn't run on a news cycle, it runs on months.
At one point, Gary Jr. looks back and he waves at someone. We don't know who he's waving at, but he appears to talk too. But there are so many questions that remain in this case. Many, many questions. What is going on with this investigation? Why did the deputies go to the house in the first place with a search warrant? Gary Jr. also faces 4 public indecency charges related to alleged incidents at his home during the last week of May, but that likely wouldn't be enough to get a search warrant. The deputies were looking for evidence of a crime at the home. That's what a search warrant is for.
And while the digital ghost hunt unfolds, the medical forensics are racing on a parallel track. The 16 children were taken to hospital on June 30th. A prosecutor said they were living in squalor. But squalor is a visual assessment. Medical neglect is a diagnosis. The former Pike County prosecutor who reviewed the case methodology described the most priority full medical and behavioral workups.
Happening as far as getting information together for the grand jury and the investigation.
I think probably the most important thing that they would be working on now is medical exams on the children, full medical workups, interviews, which probably taken place early on of the suspects, but it's a major thing is getting good medical workups on all the children to
Not just a triage check for dehydration, a deep longitudinal scan of bone density, developmental markers and cycle off isolation. One child had to be intubated. Some children, according to the state's initial public statements, may not be fully verbal. The state is now trying to interview witnesses who may lack the vocabulary to describe what happened because they were kept from school. In October of 2021, truancy complaints were filed in Gallia County because 6 older children hadn't been in school at all that year. That's not a gap in attendance. That is a severance from the social contract.
Affected mentally and physically over the past few years and the time period they're looking at.
We know that the 6 older children, there were complaints filed in Gallia County against Gary Junior and Elizabeth because the 6 older kids had not been to school in 2021 at all. In October of 2021, they had not been.
Under Ohio law, that act has a name: parental education neglect. It is the mechanism of control. When you keep a child from reading, you keep them from naming what is happening to them. The state now has to teach a new language of survival to children who were taught only the language of the house. The gap between the public statement and the jailhouse floor is where the evidence lies. Gary Senior was released from jail to a hospital for a serious medical condition that was only discovered after he fell on his way to the jail. That's a recorded fact. The intake form for Gary Jr. indicates either drug or alcohol use. That's a recorded fact. Elizabeth Ciders' lawyer says she has cooperated fully. That's a procedural statement of fact. And yet the prosecution has a gag order in place currently being challenged at the Ohio Supreme Court. A non-dissemination order is pending. The grand jury process in Scioto County doesn't run daily like in Columbus. It runs monthly, slow, deliberate, forcing the state to hold suspects on a 90-day speedy trial clock that is likely to be waived by the defense due to the sheer mass of discovery.
That's interesting. And how long can you hold the Ciders family while that's taking place?
It's with speedy trial under Ohio law, you have 270 days to get someone to trial. However, if they're held in jail, every day counts as 3. So normally from the moment they were arrested, the state would have 90 days to get them to trial. So what may happen, and I have done this in the past when I was prosecutor, maybe bring some charges to get the case going. You keep investigating and add some down the road. And something like this, again, I'm not psychic, but I would anticipate due to the complexity of it, you may see some time waivers on behalf of the defendants where they say, State of Ohio, I really don't care how long it takes you to get me to trial. And you see that a lot in homicide cases and complex investigations because there's just so much evidence for the attorneys to go through that they're not going to be able to get it done by the time like 90 days for speedy trial runs. To give an example, when you were involved in covering the Road and Manley Gilly.
This is the mechanism of control shifting from the family to the courts. The state is not just prosecuting endangering charges, they are doing a multi-generational closed loop, including public indecency charges against Gary Jr. from May, and historical records of a cousin who married a 15-year-old girl.
Our current prosecutor does the same thing. We would average out now around 120 or so cases in a year. And we're not like Columbus or even Portsmouth or Cincinnati where you have thousands of cases a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have grand jury, I know, in Franklin County and Hamilton County, where Cincinnati and Columbus are located every day. So it's just a different environment, more populated, things like that. One thing I'm really curious about, it's come out, that Elizabeth and Gary Jr., obviously, they were married when she was 15. They went over to West Virginia to do that. Then, there's been some reporting about other Ciders family members, cousins, things of that nature, who were married at 15, 14, things like that. Rob, do you see that ever down that way? Like seeing like these teenage marriages and things like that? Is that common?
The walls of the house on Omar Street were porous only to law enforcement. Now, they are porous to the world. Ask yourself a direct questions at EvidenceAxis. We believe the audience is the final investigator. Go find the Ohio Attorney General's original press release on the execution of the search warrant at 290 Omar Street. Read the specific language. It does not say they found a dirty house. It says they found evidence consistent with a crime. Cross-reference that language with the jail intake videos showing Elizabeth Ciders' bruise. Then, in the comments below, tell me what weapon the state is actually building its case on. If you followed the evidence to a conclusion that the mainstream headlines missed, like this video, share it, subscribe and turn on notifications for EvidenceAxis. We'll be back with the next filing.